You can have your
Main event of the evening.
motorcycle humps, ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, you're discussing Season 7, Episode 15, Wilderness.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Wilderness.
We open with Richie, Lori Beth, Potsy, Ralph, and Potsy and Ralph's new girlfriends, Cassie and Susie, in the Cunningham living room.
I've got something to say. We might as well get right to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Richie thinks that all 6 of them should go camping for a weekend. Proper camping. In tents, no cabin. Richie knows the most about camping, so he'll be the leader and organize everything. The others aren't so sure,
What do we know about camping?
You know nothing.
That's right.
but Lori Beth is all in, and eventually the rest agree. Though as Ralph and Susie leave, he tells Richie that if they have a terrible time, it'll be all Richie's fault.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Fonzie arrives, and upon hearing about the camping trip, insists on going along. When Richie says he doesn't want Fonzie along, Fonzie crumples and insists his feelings aren't hurt.
You didn't hurt my feelings. I just want to know why.
Richie explains it's because he wants to be leader, and if Fonzie comes along, he'll take charge. Plus, Richie knows more. Which side of the tree moss grows on, what berries are safe to eat, how to treat snakebite, how to tell time with a stick.
How to keep it up, how to cover the list, and how often.
Fonzie acquiesces and says he'll let Richie be in charge. Richie agrees to let Fonzie come. Fonzie echoes what Ralph said. If he doesn't have a good time, it'll be Richie's fault. The day of the camping trip, all 8 of them, Fonzie brought a date, arrive at the campground, and Richie blows a whistle, saying it could save their lives, and to rally whenever they hear it. Fonzie initially insists he doesn't rally, until Richie points out he's undermining Richie's authority. Fonzie weakly tells everyone to rally.
Everybody rally.
They badly set up their tents.
Aren't they a little flat?
Yes, they're a little flat.
And then Ralph, who was supposed to be collecting water with Susie, runs in screaming about a bear. He's soon followed by Susie, who is naturally angry at Ralph for running and leaving her behind.
Don't you baby me! You just ran right over me, you sissy!
Ralph blames Richie. Richie blows his whistle, saying that they're off to a slow start, but can still have a good evening. They have canned food, but no can opener.
All I see in here are cans. Where's the can opener?
Potsy Watsy brought it.
Oh, I didn't bring it. I thought you brought it.
No problem? Lori Beth packed hamburgers and buns, but no one brought matches with which to start a fire. Richie tries to start a fire by rubbing 2 sticks together, and succeeds.
Look what I have created! I have made fire!
And then it starts to rain. Richie allows everyone to give their criticisms, and they read Richie for filth. Richie allows the girls to go into their tent, and then asks the guys why so much complaining.
Do you think the pioneers had it any better than this?
No, but they're dead.
Fonzie wants to make the best out of this by taking his date on a wet nature walk, but she keeps sneezing and goes back to the tent. Fonzie, because he made a promise, reluctantly goes into the guys' tent to sleep with 3 men who smell like wet wool. Potsy and Ralph won't let Richie into the tent. Richie asks Lori Beth to sleep in the girls' tent, but Lori Beth tells him the other girls want to shove bark up Richie's nose. Richie sleeps outside in the rain.
Well, Richard Cunningham needs no tent. I got a sleeping bag.
The next morning is beautiful and sunny, and Richie is gone. Fonzie finds a torn-up sleeping bag and sends Potsy and the girls to go pick berries. Fonzie asks Ralph what bears eat.
This sounds like a good one. I give up. What do bears eat? What are you asking me for? I thought it was a riddle.
And suggests that's what might have happened to Richie. Ralph immediately screams it out so the others hear it.
You know, Malf, I'll tell you, I knew I could count on you to keep your cool.
They start to hear footsteps approaching and start panicking, thinking it's the bear returning. Fonzie grabs a rock and throws it in the footsteps' direction, and then they hear "ow" in Richie's voice.
Ow!
Their leader has returned after having left last night. They yell at Richie for making them think he was dead, but Lori Beth tells them not to yell at a hurt man. Richie says he deserves it. Going camping was a crummy idea, and it's his fault they had a bad time.
You're gonna have a bad time.
The others soften on him after finding out he walked 6 miles in the rain to get them groceries, and also get Fonzie girly magazines.
You bought me a hot rod magazine.
Anniversary issue.
Fonzie takes Richie aside, and Richie thinks it's to tell him he's a flop. Fonzie acknowledges Richie made some mistakes, but he took responsibility, and he would have been a better leader if they had been better followers. Al and Chachi show up, Al having heard about the rainstorm and wanting to pick them up, but Fonzie and Richie say they're having a great time.
We're out here, Mother Nature's giving us a hug, you know, we're breathing this fresh air. Potsy's making us a woodsy breakfast.
Al and Chachi leave, and the whole group suddenly change their minds and run after them.
Rich, wait up, Al!
That night at the Cunningham house, Richie returns home exhausted and collapses on the couch. He recounts his misfortunes to his parents and Joni, but he learns that he does have leadership potential. Fonzie comes in to ask Richie for help unloading the truck,
A lot of us out there unloading gear. You want to help?
and Richie says he'll be supervising. Fonzie picks Richie up by the shirt and gently reminds him they're in the city now.
Thank you, Peter. That was Wilderness. It first aired back on January 8th, 1980. Happy Days was followed by the premiere of a new sitcom called 1 in a Million.
Tuesday, ring in the 80s with Happy Days and a special preview comedy, 1 in a Million.
Right off.
First, the gang gets lost in the woods.
Richie was eaten by a bear!
And Fonzie's gonna track them down on Happy Days. Then, a small change cab driver inherits a corporate fortune.
Worth $200 million.
Are you crazy?
It's 1 in a Million. Tuesday night, starting at 8 on ABC.
This was a vehicle for comedian Shirley Hemphill, who had previously co-starred on ABC's What's Happening. In this new show, Shirley plays a New York City cab driver who inherits a controlling interest in a multi-million-dollar business. NBC had a new episode of The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, in which Lobo tries to make a quick buck when he discovers that a horse that was recently sold for $7 million for breeding purposes is actually sterile. And CBS went with a new episode of The White Shadow.
You know, they give cool names to TV shows like that, too, like White Shadow. Could have been called Haloed Hoop Honky.
In which one of the coach's players, Thorpe, has to decide between accepting a basketball scholarship at a Southern college and pursuing an art career. So, Peter, of those choices, what are you watching?
I'd probably go with 1 in a Million. Show premieres are always, if not especially interesting, then at least fun.
I am also sticking around to watch 1 in a Million. I like Shirley Hemphill, and I'm willing to give her a shot in a new show. Wilderness was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Barry Rabinowitz. Barry had previously written Bye Bye Blackball, Fonzie's Hero, and Fonzie the Superstar. In addition to being a TV comedy writer, Barry was also a 3-time Jeopardy champion. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Julie Brown as Susie Simmons.
Nice to meet you. I'm Susie Simmons.
Identified as Gloria in the credits. Julie is an actress, comedian, and singer-songwriter from Van Nuys, California, who was just at the beginning of her career when she did this episode of Happy Days. She also turned up on Laverne and Shirley a couple of times. In the 1980s, Julie became a fixture on MTV and the Dr. Demento show with songs like The Homecoming Queen's Got a Gun, Girl Fight Tonight, Trapped in the Body of a White Girl, and more. One of her songs, Earth Girls Are Easy, became the basis of an entire movie starring Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum in 1989.
We can't go out with these guys. They're aliens.
They can still be dates.
Most of her songs and videos revolve around her ditzy Valley Girl persona. People may also know her from the horror movie Bloody Birthday or from her guest appearances as the ultra-perky Buffy Denver on Newhart.
We're so very, very happy you joined us this evening. Please come back and visit with us again real soon. Right, Dickie?
She's had recurring roles on such series as The Edge, Animaniacs, Clueless, Strip Mall, Paradise Falls, and most recently, The Middle. Peter, were you familiar at all with a comedy of Julie Brown?
Of course. Like all cultured people, I have seen Earth Girls Are Easy.
Were you familiar with her songs and videos?
Not super familiar, outside of the ones that were in Earth Girls Are Easy.
I will never forget the first time that I saw one of Julie Brown's music videos. It's because I was skipping school. At the time, I decided to go back home rather than go to school and watch TV all day. And that's when I first saw Julie Brown singing Homecoming Queen's Got a Gun. And
nice.
Everybody run. The homecoming queen's got a gun.
That made a very strong impression on me. What did you think of Julie in this episode?
Both Susie and Cassie get little gimmicks to make them more distinct than just more of Ralph and Potsy's one episode love interests. And I'd say that Susie has the more interesting one. She has a retainer, and when she has it in, she speaks with a very prominent lisp. And since her name is Susie Simmons, yeah. She also gets a very good moment halfway through when she gets mad at Ralph for abandoning her to become Bear Chow because he is a coward. And she gets to kick him in the shins. That was great.
I think this is actually a very fun little part. As you mentioned, a lot of times these one-episode love interests are kind of throwaway parts, but I think Julie gives a pretty funny performance here and definitely makes the most of that speech impediment with the retainer. Her scene where she gets mad at Ralph, I think, is probably my favorite part of the entire episode, so a good debut for Julie Brown here. Shirley Kirkus appears for the final time as Blossom.
Blossom, Commander and the leader.
She'd also go on to appear on Laverne and Shirley. Her post-Happy Days film credits include Pennies from Heaven, Dracula Dead and Loving It, and 2 Gary Marshall movies, Frankie and Johnny and Nothing in Common. She retired from show business in the 1990s, but she's stayed busy as a dance teacher and choreographer, as well as a painter, and is now known as Shirley Kirkus Marr. Peter, any final thoughts on Blossom?
She gets pretty much nothing to do in this episode. She gets to have a small cold about halfway through, where she keeps sneezing and therefore can't go on a nature walk with Fonzie. But she has 0 lines in this episode, which is pretty par for the course with Fonzie states. It's a big shame considering this was her last appearance. Like, you couldn't have given her one funny line, guys. Come on.
Blossom is a strange character in Happy Days history in that she appears multiple times, but never really emerges as much of anything.
Yeah, at least Paula Petrolunga has a fun name to say.
And last but not least, we have Susan Mullen as Cassie.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
Identified as Cindy in the credits, Susan is a TV actress who had previously guested on Policewoman, Police Story, Mannix, Barnaby Jones, and Hawaii Five-0, a lot of cop and detective shows. She was a regular on the infamous bomb, the San Pedro Beach Bums.
The San Pedro Beach Bums.
B-U-M-S, bum!
She's also in the 1981 made-for-TV movie Elvis and the Beauty Queen, but she doesn't play the Beauty Queen or Elvis. Those roles went to Stephanie Zimbalist and Don Johnson, respectively. Did you have any feelings about Susan Mullen as Cassie?
I think she gets slightly more to do than Blossom, but considerably less to do than Susie. Her thing is that in the beginning we find out that Cassie is short for Casablanca because her parents are big fans of that movie.
He's looking at you, kid.
Which is kind of funny. And then after that, she just fades into the background. Although she and Potsy seem to have like a thing where they're very lovey-dovey with each other. But aside from that, she's closer to Blossom than she is to Susie, sadly.
For me, this was just another generic girlfriend of the week. And the fact that the names of 2 of the girlfriends were changed from the credits to the episode makes me think that this script was probably rewritten at the very last minute. TV sitcoms are infamous for rewrites happening well into the process and maybe right before they actually start filming. And so as for songs this week, there are none, no songs, but there are some cultural and historical references. This episode is named after a 1933 play, Ah, Wilderness, by Eugene O'Neill. It's one of the few upbeat plays that Eugene ever wrote. Ah, Wilderness focuses on a young college-bound man, Richard Miller, coming of age in turn-of-the-century Connecticut. It's been adapted to film several times and is a staple of community theater. Peter, do you have any history with Ah, Wilderness?
I do not, sadly.
One thing that I found interesting was that a film adaptation of Ah, Wilderness called Summer Holiday.
Since the day that Mr. Noah put together things, many furry, many finny, many feather things,
actually led to the Andy Hardy series.
And the Andy Hardy series is kind of like a proto-Happy Days. I feel like we stumbled onto a huge pop culture secret. I feel like Indiana Jones.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Richie says that he, Potsy, and Ralph went to Chicago to stare at the Playboy Mansion.
Last year you dragged me to Chicago to stare at the Playboy Mansion.
There were actually 2 Playboy Mansions. The first was in Chicago's Gold Coast district at 1340 North State Parkway. Hugh Hefner bought the place in 1959. The house had its own bowling alley and bar, plus dormitories for the bunnies who worked at the Playboy Club. After some legal trouble in Illinois involving drug charges, Hefner moved to California in 1974 and started a second Playboy Mansion. The original one became a dormitory for the Art Institute of Chicago and then was turned into condos. The second Playboy Mansion was located at 10236 Charing Cross Road in Los Angeles. Hugh lived there until his death in 2017. Richie also says that he and his friends visited Mickey Mantle's mother in Oklahoma. Mickey Mantle was the famed center fielder who played for the New York Yankees from 1951 to 1968. The Mick is considered one of baseball's all-time greatest players.
I love Mickey.
Mickey who?
You know who, the fella with the celebrated swing.
But his private life was marred by infidelity and alcoholism, and he died at the age of 63 in 1995, just months after his mother, Lavelle Richardson Mantle. The Mantles were indeed from Oklahoma, as was Ron Howard himself, and Lavelle was still living there when she died. If you want to visit Lavelle's grave, she's buried in Miami, Oklahoma, at the Grand Army of the Republic Cemetery. And in case you were wondering, yes, Wisconsin has plenty of bears.
Bears? Oh, my!
24,000 black bears at last count, mostly living in the northern third of the state.
What are you so afraid of, Zigzag?
Bears, yo!
And from the looks of these bones, they're the eating people kind of bears.
Black bears do not normally stalk, kill, and eat humans. In fact, they would rather avoid conflict with humans if possible, but they will attack on rare occasions if food supplies are dangerously scarce.
Maybe he just wanted to attack Ralph because Ralph is very annoying. And he mistook Richie for Ralph because they both have red hair.
That's a common mistake that I think anyone could make. Ralph says he's snoring because of the altitude. The highest natural point in Wisconsin is Timms Hill in the north central region of the state. It's located in Timms Hill County Park and has a scenic trail, so it's possible that the boys are camping there.
Located near the town of Ogama in Price County, Timms Hill is part of the Northern Highlands section of the state, which at one point was a mountain range similar to the Alps. Though, over millions of years, erosion and repeated glaciation smoothed the region down into the land of woods, lakes, and hills remaining today.
To answer Fonzie's question, bears are omnivorous. They'll eat whatever they can find, including meat if they can get it.
Oh, no, baby, don't show me that. I can't eat that. 'Cause I want a seafood diet. That's everything I see, I eat.
Richie brings back Malamars.
The last case you got to the bottom of was a case of Malamars!
Malamars, oh, that's going in the act.
These are graham crackers covered with marshmallow and chocolate. They've been produced by Nabisco since 1913. They're based on a dessert invented in Montreal in 1901. Apparently, these marshmallow treats have different names in different countries. They're just called Malamars in America. Weirdly, they are not marketed during the summer months because they melt. Peter, do you have any history with Malamars?
I do not. I don't think I've ever eaten a Malamar. I guess they just always passed me by.
I've never had a Malamar either. What I learned was that since they're not sold during the summer, people hoard them.
Oh yeah, I think I vaguely remember hearing something about that. Oh my god. People are so weird.
You make anything scarce and people will hoard it. And
it's like when people would go to different McDonald's locations to have the McRib.
Richie brings back a copy of Hot Rod magazine for Fonzie. This is a monthly magazine devoted to drag racing and muscle cars. It's been coming out since 1948, and they're still in business.
My pappy said, son, you're going to drive me to drinking if you don't stop driving that Hot Rod Lincoln.
Other observations, Linda Goodfriend has been given a more era-appropriate hairdo for this episode, abandoning her usual Dorothy Hamill look. In this way, she compensates for Don Most and Anson Williams, whose haircuts are totally unrealistic for the time. Lately on MeTV, they've been playing the early episodes of Happy Days. And when you look at those episodes, you see that Anson and Don had era-appropriate hair for the first couple of years. What happened?
With Anson Williams, I suspect it's because he was trying to push himself as a singer, and maybe he was afraid that if he had period-appropriate hair on Happy Days, that would somehow damage his singing career.
Give me a head with hair, long, beautiful hair.
Don Most did release an album in 1976, so maybe he was also doing the same thing. But also, it's 1980 now in our watch-through, so maybe the hairstylist just kind of gave up.
I think that the actors rebelled against having the 50s hair. They wanted to have fluffier 70s, 80s hair.
Give me down to there, shoulder length longer. Here, baby, there, mama, everywhere, daddy, daddy.
As silly as this episode can be, the conflict between Richie and Fonzie...
No, come on, I'm going to have a great time. Don't worry about me.
Fonzie, I don't want you to come.
I felt was a preview of the more serious dispute that they'll have during the Welcome Home two-parter in season 11. In that one, Richie finally chafes against being second to Fonzie all the time. He's tired of being Fonzie's sidekick or having Fonzie push him around all the time, and he rebels against that. I saw a little preview of that in this episode. Did you feel that way, or am I overreading this episode?
I think that kind of makes sense. This is a pretty goofy episode. For the most part, Richie doesn't come across as great in it, but like a recurring thing with Richie is that he does want something more than humdrum suburban life. He wants to make something of himself, and he does want some kind of capital. He wants to matter, and you can maybe see him kind of trying to do that by blowing a whistle all the time.
So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
Marion is going on a date with Howard, and so she's wearing this really nice yellow and black sweater skirt combo, and it looks really classy. What I'm learning from doing this podcast is that Marion Ross is the fashion MVP of this show. I did like Richie's hat, though. It was very Boy Scout.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, it was. It was pretty funny. There were some genuinely very funny moments, but I do feel like it could have been more. It was on the verge of being an all-time great episode. It just needed to take advantage of its comedic premise a bit more.
The one thing that limited this episode was the fact that they shot it on a sound stage, in front of a live studio audience, multi-camera. I think this was an episode that really should have required them to go out and film on location, take the actors actually out into a camping situation, take them out on some Paramount-owned property, some ranch somewhere.
And they should have gotten a real bear.
There's all this talk about bears in the episode, and we never actually even see stock footage of one bear. Other than that, this episode is actually quite a lot of fun. I like camping episodes of TV shows. Just about every sitcom ever takes its characters camping sooner or later.
Because camping is very stressful, which is why I've never done it.
I have never done it either. I've often said that camping to me would be a punishment. But I think that they write camping episodes for sitcoms because they get sick of the usual settings, schools and businesses and suburban homes, and they want to see how are these characters going to react in nature. What happens if we take them out of their comfort zone, put them out in the woods? What happens to them then? In a way, it brings out the worst in a lot of their personalities, brings out the worst in Richie for sure. And then it really brings out the worst in Potsy and Ralph. And Fonzie at least is able to have a little bit of sanity and a little bit of responsibility in this situation. So I think the moral of this story is don't go camping. If you have a vacation coming up, do something else with it.
Do not put yourself in proximity to bears. Just leave them alone.
Leave them alone and they will leave you alone.
How are we ever going to show our faces to bears again?
We'll just stay away from bears.
How are we going to do that?
Yo, we all got to remember, we have free will. It ain't no thing to stay away from bears. This ain't olden times. People don't be running into bears in the street.
How would you feel if a bear came into your home and set up a sleeping bag just outside of your bedroom?
You would be annoyed, and you would have every right to be annoyed. So I think we should let the bears have that whole upper third of Wisconsin. All in all, I will say Our Wilderness is fun. People should check it out if it comes up in the rotation or if they have the opportunity to see it somewhere. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroours@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Joni has to decide whether or not to go to Inspiration Point with her boyfriend in Joni's Dilemma.
Sounds like a very intriguing episode indeed.
I have no memory of this episode at all. I'm half dreading it and half optimistic about it.
Well, I guess we'll have to tune in next week and find out about how you felt. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Oh, J is for Julie. You are unique. L, love you oh so truly. I watch you every week. She's the hottest little hen ahead on MTV. Just say Julie.
That's me.
Papa.